welcome to all that are joining us. So we have 12 on right now. I'm guessing we might see some more come in and some might go. But we are going to take a look at SketchUp and VCarve Pro today. We're not going to get into any real great detail or depths. This is more or less just an overview of what can be done in SketchUp and how to go from SketchUp to VCarve Pro. It's been a while since I've done this. I opened it up before I came in and see some things have changed from what I once knew. So there's not up to speed on it as much as I would have hoped to have been, but we're going to explore this all together and see how SketchUp works. So I am using SketchUp 2020. I do have the desktop version that I just kind of like to have the software on my computer. So SketchUp does have a version as well that's just an online version, just a cloud-based version where you don't have to download and install anything. So there is that option. There is also a free version of SketchUp that exists. The difference with that is the free version doesn't allow you to be able to create a dynamic component. And we'll kind of explore a little bit about what dynamic components are and how that works. And again, not any great lengths. We might just create just a small box and of different sizes and see how to bring that into VCarve Pro. So the first thing orient ourselves with is SketchUp itself. It's a blend between like standard CAD softwares like AutoCAD and VCarve and that sort of thing, between that and Fusion and SolidWorks. It's a blend of both, and it is maybe a little bit harder to get control of it or to understand it to figure out how it works. But SketchUp is a 3D software where it works on extruding shapes. So we draw the shape that we want, and we basically grab that shape and say we want it to be, push it up or push it down to get different sizes out of it. So we're going to take a look at how all this works. Before we get into that, I'm just going to start off with going into the SketchUp and doing new, so we can see right from the beginning. And no, I do not need to save that. And we are completely new. So the big advantage of the SketchUp is there is this thing that's called the 3D warehouse. That is where you're able to upload and also download work from other people, others that have submitted items to the 3D warehouse. You could use the items for just decorations within your model for presentations. Some of the warehouse items can also be turned into VCarve Pro files. So we're going to take a look at the 3D warehouse. Now that is found under the Windows menu and clicking 3D warehouse. So we'll also explore how to create some of this. So I've just did a search here for wall shelf to see if there's any here that we might be able to just bring in and cut and export out. And not all of these models in warehouse items are like created equal. Not all of them are able to be cut, and we'll learn why. So if I, let's just try this hanging wall here and select download, and I could download that directly into the sketch and place it around on the screen, and I click it there. So it is brought in right here. It does have some dimensions drawn in it, which we may or may not need. And then we see that it is made up in components here. So this is a good sign that an item like this, that what we have, can be brought into separate components and brought into VCarve Pro to be able to orient and lay flat. So quickly to show that, and it may or may not work, we're going to find out. So I'm going to go to File and do a Save As. And one thing that I have to do, and depending on what version of SketchUp you have, you may or may not need to do this. I need to back up to 2019 version. The VCarve Pro import will not work with the newer models of SketchUp. So I'm going to save this as a 2019 and just calling that a shelf. And I am going to actually just put that in my downloads folder. The reason why I'm doing downloads folder is that's my downloads folder is a folder that I consider an okay to delete folder. So anything that I put in my downloads folder, I just know that I don't need to keep it. I'm okay to just randomly delete it. So I'm going to give it a name of shelf and clicking save. Now I'm not making any changes or modifying anything in SketchUp other than I brought that in, I click save. I'm even leaving Laura over here in our model, and we will see what happens when we bring this into VCarve Pro. So I'm going to jump over to VCarve Pro and create a new file. You would enter in the size material that you would like and the thickness of the material and select OK. This is done in the same type of fashion that we talked about was it just this past Tuesday when we worked with imported models, maybe, but you can just directly open up a SketchUp model. You could do that, but by doing that, you might have that offset issues and everything else. So when I'm importing models or importing items, I like to start with a new fresh thing and enter in the material setup myself rather than letting the import kind of fill in some items. So by bringing this in, I know exactly where my Z0 is, X0, Y0, and everything should be. So with that done, I'm going to go to File, Import Vectors. I could also click the icon right here that says Import Vectors into the current job. And in my Downloads folder, scrolling down to where we have this shelf, I'm going to select Open. At this point, it does open up, and we have a couple things on a lot of things happening right here. So we need to know how everything is oriented. So that shelf was brought in, oriented to look like the shelf. So we need to know how parts are to be laid out and laid flat. So what we are going to have is we're going to explode this. So just going to jump over to SketchUp and look at this. So right now it needs to kind of explode our item here. So we have a bracket, a top, and a bottom to it. So 1, 2, 3, 4 different components that are making the shelf up. But the top part we need to have imported here, but these braces need to be rotated around so they're laid flat. And this is what this fill-in sheet here is trying to do for us. So the auto orient is going to put the largest face to the top. And typically that's what we would want. And that pretty much works all the time. Then we have these layer tools or layers over here. This is one of the features that I kind of got lost on when I was doing exploring and trying to prepare for this is 2020 version of SketchUp changed the way and the location of layers. So I have a little learning to do it myself, but we're going to still see how this is brought in. Right now, you can see we have 2 separate layers here. One is dimensions that has 4 parts on it, and the other is layer 2 that has 2 parts on it. I'm not quite liking why only 2 parts. So I'm going to leave both of those checked and just click OK to bring this in to see what happens. All right, so there is Laura, and the items were brought in as grouped items. And we could select Laura, and I am going to delete, and we don't need her in our drawing because we're not going to cut. I'm going to bring that top section down. So it has created each imported object was created as a grouped item. So even though this is a single object that is on that group, it was still brought in as a grouped item. So I'm going to sweep select that. And actually, I just do a sweep select of all. And typing the letter U on the keyboard is going to ungroup that to allow us to maybe clean this up a little bit and remove the items. And we can come back and go over into SketchUp to see what all of this extra stuff was there. So I just removed some lines there. This is the backer line that's going through here. Looks like we had some dados, but you can notice the same issues that we had from Tuesday are prevalent here as well in our SketchUp model. So this is looking like it's created for a dado that we want to pocket this out, but the lines are drawn in such a way that we kind of have overlapping vectors here. You can see the difference between the dotted line going here and over here. So my guess on what's happening here is we have one continuous line or set of vectors that are joined together that start and go around and then come back through. This center section, we really don't need to have it there because we don't need that. I don't need this item here in the end. So I'm going to clean some of this up and remove it just to see what's happening and what this really looks like. And I showed this on Tuesday as well. But I'm going to hit the node editing, typing the letter N on the keyboard. Opens up node editing. And I always start with the start point, which is right here. So I'm going to just grab that start point and move it up out of the way, just so we could, expose what's really happening here. And yeah, that's kind of what I had thought, that line is going straight around and up and over. So to clean this up and fix this, a couple ways of doing it. One, since we have it broken apart here, I'm just going to delete these line spans. I'm deleting that because I know the shortcut command to delete that line span is the letter D. And I know it is the letter D from when I right click over top of a span. You could click delete span, we see that D, and just either clicking that or hovering over your mouse, over the top of the part and hitting the delete. At this point, I need to now draw in lines, and we still have the line tool function, but that is where I want to end. So I'm just going to hit the space bar. The space bar like disconnects that line, but leaves the line tool opened up for me to come over to finish out the second shape over here. And I have to go through and join those together. But another method for this, I'm going to do undo several times back to the start and see what happens if I just use the scissors to trim the center of this away. And it looks like that was actually the better and faster method to get down to what we actually want. So at this point, we have our objects listed. We could move and drag those around, fit them best on the screen wherever we'd like to have them, and get them to, and then toolpath them just as we would any other item. So I'm going to jump back over into SketchUp and take a look at another item that we could maybe be brought in. I was searching earlier. I found one that was created by Bill Young. So I'm going to go into our SketchUp model here and just going to undo everything that I've done. And Laura's still there. I could always remove Laura right now by selecting her either here, or if you notice under the outliner here, I could select it there as well and just hit the delete on the keyboard. And Laura is no longer over top of her model until we start a new fresh drawing and model again. So Laura sometimes helps when she's there, mainly because when you're bringing things in, out of, into, and from the 3D warehouse, it helps give a sense of scale to know what size or how big the model is that you're in, because you really have to pay attention to some of these models that are out there. May not necessarily be designed or drawn to any certain scale or any units that were measured. The creator of that model may have been using it just for representation purposes, display purposes only, and really to them scale or size wasn't an issue. So going to take a look at the 3D warehouse again, and instead of searching for shelf, I'm just going to do a search for CNC. Furniture, and you know, there's a lot here. So the reason why I did, and I was exploring CNC furniture, is because it's the best bet that the folks that have uploaded these models are most likely they design the models for themselves to go and open them up on their own and cut them on their own machine. After we download the Bill Young version, I want to come back and just explore what this open desk is. It looks somewhat interesting. So we'll see how that works out. Here is a table that has some contours and it's all slot together. So again, I'm just going to hit download, and yes, I'm going to download it directly into my model space. You drag it around, and once you click it, it is placed. So we have our imported table, and inside of that table, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different parts. Or 5 different components that make up this table. So well, we'll get into that in a bit. So I'm going to do a file, save as, and again, making sure that I use the 2019 version, and going to give this one a name of table, and clicking save. Coming back into VCarve Pro, going to import selected vectors, find the table, select open, and again, we get the same type of, the same fill-in sheet that opens up, orient the largest face on top, which is good. We'll say okay. And the parts get kind of laid out. They're not nested, they're just placed on the screen. So at this point, we can choose the nesting function here. The one thing I want to do is increase the size of the material because I have 4x4 here. So going into the job setup and dimensions, I could enter in the X value to be 96. So I'm going to cut this out of material that is 96 by 48, 3/4 inch thick. Select OK. Now to nest this, I'm just going to do a sweep select of all of those objects, and click nesting, and enter in the parameters for the toolpath. So the tool diameter I will cut this out with is going to be a 3/8. I'll probably go with a 1/4 inch because we have some slots that I have to worry about, and I don't want to have to tool change. The clearance between one part to the next, I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. If I was doing this as cabinet making, I would probably set that clearance to 1/8 of an inch. But for organic objects like this, where you may not have a vacuum hold down using tabs, you're going to possibly need a bigger space between those parts. I'm going to allow rotation to get a best fit. And once all those parameters are entered in, we could click preview. The preview is going to give us a quick little preview line of what is happening here. And, you know, I hate to have cut out onto a second sheet just because of it's probably coming from this clearance here. And it really looks like I'd probably be able to fit this on one sheet. So I'm going to reduce that clearance down to 1/8 of an inch. And click preview again. And sure enough, so now we're down to one sheet to fit, maybe even parts like this. I may not even have gone through the nesting, or maybe once get it nested, I'm going to say do a selected all. We're still there. We'll preview that. And then I would select OK to have those placed there. There's a couple of things that I probably want to do is, rotate these around to where, they're kind of flowing with the grain a little bit better, which then means you have to manipulate and move parts around just a little bit. But just know that this is how the nesting works, and nesting does a good job when you have a lot of parts. If you only have a few parts, you might be able to do the nesting a little bit faster or better by doing it yourself. All right, so that is a little bit on importing just like existing made models out of the 3D warehouse and bringing them in. And so what we're going to take a look at now is kind of the differences of what models are and how they work within SketchUp and what is a component. Similar to what we have had in our Fusion sessions, where we're able to make individual components. Then with the individual components, we're then able to combine them or make them into one final look object. So we're going to just create a basic box and square for this. So coming into SketchUp, we'll just go File, New. And there is Laura again. So I'm going to select her and remove and ask her to leave my space. So rotating around is the center mouse wheel. Pressing that down is the orbit. Holding the Shift key down and pressing on the center wheel is a pan around. The coloring that we have here, the red line is the X, the green line is the Y, and the blue line here is the Z. So it's the X, Y, Z of our layout. I'm not real concerned with drawing this and laying it out as far as where 0, 0 is, because as you saw, when we bring in these parts into VCarve Pro, they get reoriented and moved around. So we're going to explore a little bit on what a component is and what just a model is. So, and see the differences. So to create a shape, and that is done under shapes, and we're just going to keep it very simple by just drawing out some squares and rectangles. So to size this, I'm going to select to draw a rectangle, and then I'm going to come down here into space or drawing space and click once. Try that again. Click. And it is listed there, and we see it's drawing kind of there. But if I want a 12 by 12, let me rotate around a little bit so we could see how that is being drawn. So right now we can see that it is being drawn on the X plane and the Y. And if I want this to be, say, 12 by 30 or 30 by 12, I could just enter in 30, 12 and then enter, and it is going to give me a rectangle that is 30 in the X, 12 in the Y. Once we have our drawing, I'm going to use our selection tool over here, and it has a perimeter to it, and then the interior here. So this is a flat 3D surface. It is a little bit kind of confusing because right now we have edges that we're able to select, and we're able to delete those edges. I could also select the center here and delete that center to be only left with the outline. Well, that's not what I want to do. I want to leave that shape together, and I want to be able to give this a little bit of thickness And if I wanted to create, say, a box that was made out of 3/4 inch material, we need to draw the shape here and use the push-pull tool, which is going to hover that over top of the 3D facing surface. And you see it kind of gets all these little dots in there. That means that is, when you click, that is able to be selected. So selecting and clicking there, I'm able to pull that up or move it down. To go an exact distance, you start moving your mouse and pulling it in the direction that you would want to extrude it. And if I want this to be 3/4 of an inch thick, I'm going to type in 0.75 and then enter. So that gives us a panel that is 30 inches by 12 inches by 3/4 inch thick. To scale or change this, I would need to scale this, and you would scale it by a percentage. I don't like doing that method, so I'm not even going to show it. But just to point out, we are still not as a component. So we are still able to click on this part and drag it and change that size. But I have no idea what size that is, so I'll just do a Control Z. I can always come up here and draw another shape over top of that shape, there to there. Use the selection tools, or even if we just drew, say, a shape inside of here. And now when we use this push-pull tool, we could see the difference. So I could pull just the center up or just the outside of this up. So basically, yeah, you think, well, I got a box there. We're able to import and cut this. Well, when we go to import this out into VCarve Pro, we're only going to get one object, because that's all this is just one object with a hole or a slot cut into it. So that's not how we would want to make this box. So I'm going to undo getting back to where we just have only that panel, and using the select tool here, just going to do a sweep select of that entire component, or the entire object. It's not a component yet, the entire object. And now I'm going to right click and say make a component. And it is now gives you a little bit where you're able to define what this is. So I'm going to say it is a side, and I will say create. So at this point, it is one item that is not able to be extruded or pushed or pulled in the same way, because it is a component. And now when we draw anything on top of this or next to it, it is separate from what we have here. So to maybe create, say, kind of a wall cabinet or something here, I might want to rotate this up. And the rotate works where you have like a protractor here. And we see if I click it here, it is only able to rotate it around X and Y, or which would be about the Z. But I kind of want to stand this panel up. So to do that, I'm going to make sure it is on the Y plane or on that side there. Move my mouse out to the right, and I can move it up. And the bottom right of the screen is showing the angle there. So if I just type in 90, it's going to move it and rotate it 90 degrees up. So to help organize and kind of get the feel for things, I am going to take and move this object, and when I select it, you can see it's kind of snapping to the points. I'm just going to click there and bring it down and snap it to the center of origin here. That just helps keep things a little bit more organized and together, and this is what we have. So to create maybe a bottom to this, I could go and draw another shape. And again, I should have sized it. So I'm going to click there and drag it out 12, 12, just to make it a square. We'll increase that to 0.75. And I will again go back to the selection tool, do a sweep select of this object, and make that a component. So again, right click, make a component, and I will name it bottom. And maybe underscore top, because it could be a top or a bottom. Select create. And now it is an item that we could move around. I'm going to zoom in just that lower left, and going to click right there to the other side. And to make a duplicate of this, as I am dragging this, and this is one that I probably won't get to first time. Nope. I believe it is maybe the shift key down. One of these buttons, when you hold it, it makes a copy of it. Do a Control Z to get back to all that I found the right button. So I'm going to drag it up just to make that copy. And now I'm going to grab that line to this line. Also, again, we could take too many keystrokes right there. Now for the side, I'm going to take that side and make a copy of it to make it a right side. So using the move. And now we have kind of a basic cabinet. Now, there are much more advanced features that we are able to use to make this what's called a dynamic component, to where we're able to modify and link all of these shapes together to where when we draw one item, all items go the same, like expand out. So I'm going to now open up one that I've already created just so we could see what that dynamic component looks like and how it completely works. But know that I created the control, the cabinet, just that same way. It is done this way. So to answer the question, it was the control key, holding the control button down. As I make as you move that, it is going to make a duplicate copy of that. So sorry to have not stated that. So that is basically a creation of a cabinet or a box. Just to maybe point out here, I'm going to right click on the component and come down here to say dynamic component attributes, just to point out how it works and what's going to happen here. So that is the side that we're doing. And if we click the plus button here, we're able to add attributes to it. So what do I want to do? I want to change the size of this. So I'm going to add all of that. So there we see that is right now 30 by 12 by 0.75. You could double click in any one of these, and if I want to make that 15 inches deep, you would just hit 15, and there it is now 15 inches. The key to making this a whole dynamic component is we are able to have kind of components within components. So I will kind of point that out and show what that is. So right now we have 4 separate components, a top and a bottom and 2 sides. So selecting all of those objects, right clicking, and going to make that a component. And just give that a quick name. And now underneath of this cabinet component, you can see now when we select it and I move, all of the other components move and go with it. So now we have those 4 separate components, and we could make this whole object a dynamic component. So going to take a look at what that is just briefly. Under component options, no. Under component attributes. So now, rather than just having that one here, we have side, bottom, top, and the 4 different components underneath of the cabinet component. So we have under the side, here we have the sizes, and we're able to make up whatever component we want to have here. So again, if I want to have the size of this, so what this component is telling me that is X is 13.5 inches, which is the total width of this box. And the height is 12 and the Z is 30. Changing any one of these numbers on top really isn't going to do anything for us because we need to also change the other components. So the side is going to be the easiest one for us to modify. So let's say if I want to make the sides 30 inches high, I'm just going to come down here to the 30 under the X value, which is 30. And I am going to say that I want this value to be equal to the value of the Z. It's equal to the Z, and we'll say okay to that. So it's still 30 inches. But now when we go up top here and make this 30 at 24 and move over, we can see that everything has shifted now in size on our cabinet here. So again, if I wanted it to be 12 inches, enter, we can see it is now 12 inches. So you're able to have and modify the size and the dynamics of each other component based on the nested components, or you could control the nested components of the main component by linking them together in this way. So I'm just going to point out one that I have already completed that is in the warehouse. So if we go to Windows and then 3D Warehouse, and the great thing about this is I am able to come up in my button here, and I could view my content. So all of my models, and why is it empty? Not sure. So let's see if I do a search. So here are components that I have created, and we could just click on any one of these and bring it in. Let's click on the base cabinet and load this directly into our model, and there it is. So we now have a dynamic component that we are able to completely change the size and the look of this cabinet simply by right-clicking on it and coming into the component options. And now if I want the cabinet to be 21 inches and not 18, I would select that, select apply, and it is going to increase in size by 21. If the door, I want it to appear that the door is hinged on the opposite side to make it this knob on the left side rather than the right, I would change the door hand from left to right, and that is going to kind of give us the appearance that the door moves to the opposite side. So with showing that, let's do a quick save of this to see how this is now brought into VCarve Pro for us to cut. So I'm going to go into File, Save As, again, making sure I'm saving it as an older version of 2019. Coming over into VCarve Pro, just do a sweep select of everything here, delete those objects, and do an import vectors. Select the cabinet, open, Going to leave everything as default. We have a total of 18 parts. Wow. I'm not sure why there's so many parts there. But I believe that's in the door. So we'll see what happens here. So I'm going to say okay. And yep, it's even brought in the cabinet knob, which we do not need. And there are all of the components that make up that cabinet. There are some components that we may or may not need, but we could remove those and say, or I'm not sure what some of these components are from or for, but we could certainly come back over to VCarve or into SketchUp and kind of analyze that just a little bit more to see what some of those parts might be from. I think some of them are the door panels and such. But anyway, I just want to say that bringing in models from SketchUp into VCarve Pro can be done. It's fairly easy to do, but it's also a challenge if you are not the creator of that part to know what all the components and parts are when you bring them in. So this is a fairly basic example of SketchUp. So I hope that is somewhat useful. There are extensions within SketchUp too. That's what I just did. I don't know if it's working. There are extensions where you could, kind of export into other software that will then eventually just lay out parts for us. So there we have it. There, it's brought in a lot of them. I don't know why it's brought in 20 parts, but it brought in a total of 24 of them for us. But that is, SketchUp it's nice. It's good for visual displays. I don't know if I would really use it all the time for design purposes as far as drawing out, but it is great for representing what you would like to make, to be able to visualize what the product is going to look like before you make it. And it's a fairly easy 3D software to use. And again, with the 3D warehouse, to be able to import and bring other items in to help decorate what your drawing is going to look like, that might help make visualization of the product that you're making to present to a customer a little bit easier. There are also rendering type applications that's able to take the SketchUp model and take it to a rendering to get it to be almost a photorealistic item. Some items like that cost money. Some are free. What you pay for usually typically depends on the quality of the rendering that you get. That is kind of the basics of SketchUp and being able to import those into VCarve Pro. Finished up a little bit early today, so I apologize if you've set out the full hour and 15 minutes that we typically do for this. But we have plenty of time for questions and answers right now. You can use VCarve Pro to cut the cabinet parts out. Cabinet making, you would want to use more of a specific program for that, and that is what the extension here did. So if I wanted to bring in another one let's bring in another drawer base, you can download that and bring that right into the move it around to get a visualization, layout of it, and then going into the extension. It's an import. I know that's a base cabinet, so I'm going to say a base Okay, and the other one is a 4-drawer cabinet. So I'm going to come down here and say it's a drawer base. And now we have the cabinets in this list here, for some reason, is bringing it in high quantities. So I'm going to reduce that to 1 and 1 and click calculate. So this is software. It's also adding other features to the cabinet rather than just bringing in directly from the VCarve Pro, where we would have to add in, unless the component has the holes in all the other features and functions there. The difference between the paid version and the free version is I don't know all of the details between the two, but I do know the free version does not allow you to create the dynamic components. And I don't even believe that the free version allows the component options. So for example, if I had the free version, going to dynamic components and selecting the component options, I do not believe you would be able to change the size of the component using this in the free version. The dynamic components is the reason that I have the professional version. The paid version is to be able to create the dynamic components. So yeah, there are a lot of cabinets and furniture that is already made in SketchUp and that you're able to use, lots of them there. Again, you just have to be careful because not all of them are able to be cut or imported in a way, because they may not be made up of separate components, or the creator of that part may have just designed it as an interior designer to be able to present to the the end user of what their living room is going to look like, or what their kitchen is going to look like, not necessarily using it to bring into VCarve Pro or any other CAM software to cut. So as long as they are made up of separate components, you're able to bring them in and lay them flat and kind of break it apart to be able to cut those on your ShopBot. So VCarve, yeah, so no, I showed two things there I probably shouldn't have shown. So one is coming into VCarve Pro, there is no shelf holes inside of this cabinet, or there are none here on this cabinet. So VCarve Pro is not going to be able to add anything that is not already in the shelf or in the cabinet. What I did bring in that we're seeing here is another program. It's not VCarve Pro, this is Cabinet Parts Pro, and that Cabinet Parts Pro is what is adding all the other features that's needed to build that cabinet. Yeah, no, when bringing into VCarve Pro, whatever is drawn on that component will be imported into VCarve Pro on that component. VCarve Pro and Aspire, do a great job for a lot of two-dimensional type work, but I wouldn't use either one of those for cabinet making. If you're a cabinet shop, you'd still want VCarve Pro and Aspire to create some of the specialty items that you might need, some balances, some just custom radius type work. But if you're looking for specific cabinet making software, you're looking at Cabinet Parts Pro, which is a basic data entry program, or a program like KCD, which is a full, you design it, you draw it, you lay it out, and then it goes to the machine. VCarve Pro is, it's great software. Aspire, great software, but there are, better tools specifically for certain industries. Yeah, absolutely. You could draw those parts after the fact in VCarve Pro if you wanted to, or if you were making your components, you could certainly use SketchUp and brought them in and draw them in your component. But yeah, you could draw those in here in all the holes once you brought it in. But again, it's as a cabinet maker, it's a lot of work to go through when there's software out there that just does it for you, complete automation. But if you're just doing a one or two for your garage or your house, certainly add them in there. But as a full-time cabinet maker, you wouldn't really want to go this route. So I might use SketchUp for the design or the layout for the cabinets. So a lot of people do that and bring it in. So you might, there could be, but definitely SketchUp for the layout presentation. But I don't know if I would entirely use SketchUp to draw in all of the dados, the shelf holes, in all of that. Mainly a lot of SketchUp circles are not circles, they're polygons. When you import it into VCarve Pro, VCarve Pro does do a decent job of making sure that it converts all of those circles that are made up of line segments into circles. But no, SketchUp I think is great for presentation type software and good for the very basics of cabinet making. And again, if you're just making cabinets for yourself, your home, and not making them often, yes, SketchUp and VCarve Pro is going to do just fine for you. Well, we are going to be closing up here, or I am, for the day. Feel free to email me any questions that you have. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week. You have a good day.